You might not have heard about this lens before. You might have heard about this company as a company that makes lens filters, but not as a company that makes lenses. This is an 85mm f1.4 lens for full frame cameras by a company called Kase. This lens is their first ever lens that they're releasing, and usually when a brand new product is released in its first iteration, there are certain drawbacks and certain flaws that that first version usually has. But this being Kase's first ever lens, I'm actually surprised at how well this actually performs. Two things straight out of the bat is that the front element of this lens is magnetic. So that means, for example, if you have a magnetic lens cover like this, you can attach it like that. Kase also makes magnetic lens filters, which I do not have unfortunately, but they also just attach like that. The other thing is that this lens has actually two function buttons, and one of these buttons has a function rarely seen in lenses. More on that in just a bit. Now with this one, not only are you able to just attach a magnetic filter, it also has a thread as well, so you can do your traditional screw-on filters as well. They also include a magic clip-in filter that goes in front of your sensor, and that I believe is about ND4. So that's a really neat extra accessory to have. All right, so let's dig into this lens, and by the end of this video, you'll figure out whether this lens is for you and whether you should pick this up. Before I continue though, I do want to say that this video is not sponsored, and although Kase did send me this lens to try out, they do not get to see this video before you do, and all the thoughts in this video are my own. In terms of price, this goes for $738 US as at the time of the making of this video, which is kind of acceptable, I think, for a third-party lens of this focal length and of this aperture, maximum aperture of f1.4. The closest competitors to this lens are the Viltrox 85mm f1.4 Pro and the Zero Aurora 85mm f1.4. Both of those lenses are priced very similarly at about $599 US, and yes, that is a little bit cheaper than this lens by Kase, but there are certain features of this lens that you might... That died. All right, back in business. So as I was saying, there are certain features on this lens that might justify paying a little bit more for this as opposed to the Viltrox or the Zero Aurora lens. So this lens is available for Sony E-mount, Nikon set mount, and Fujifilm X mount. I've been testing the E-mount version on my Sony a7 IV. The lens weighs 580 grams or about 1.3 pounds, which is pretty light. Overall, the lens feels kind of premium and overall very sleek. The lens is weather sealed and also has a USB port for firmware updates. It has a 72mm filter thread, and that front thread is also magnetic, so you can attach magnetic filters by Kase. If you know of any that might fit this lens, let everybody know in the comments below. It comes with two lens caps, this magnetic lens cap, and also your regular lens cap like so, depending on which one you want to use. The focus ring feels nice and it has a nice dampening. The aperture ring can be clicked or declicked, so you can turn that on and off. The only thing that I have with the aperture ring though is that there isn't a physical dent or anything between f16 and automatic. So if you're not looking at the lens, you might go a little bit too far and go from f16 to A. So something to keep in mind. The lens has a metal mount and also a rubber gasket for weather sealing. This lens has no built-in stabilization, but that is in line with other similar lenses in a similar price point. So about the two function buttons, the first one works just like a function button that you find in any other lens. The second one though has two uses. So the first one is if you short press it, it will automatically focus to its minimum focusing distance, and a long press will lock the lens to your current focus point. And this allows you to quickly return to your previously set focus point with just the press of this button. So that's a super neat and unique feature to have. There is also a manual and autofocus switch as well. The minimum focus distance is 0.7 meters or 75 centimeters, which is quite close. In fact, just a tiny bit closer than the Viltrox 85mm f1.4. And this allows this lens to have a magnification of almost 0.14 times. But this is not a macro lens by any means, but you might get a little close to some of your subjects that you're shooting due to the close minimum focusing distance. In terms of optical quality, this lens is really good. It is sharp and it has no color shifts. Even at f1.4, I found that it was pretty sharp overall. There were some softness in the corners, but that gradually improved as I stopped down. By f4, f5.6, the corners were actually pretty sharp as well. In real photos, in real case scenarios, I didn't notice any of this. Photos were great, overall quite sharp. Autofocus I found that was quite snappy and that it tracked quite well. It was a little bit slow at times, but if you're doing video, a slow autofocus might be a good thing. So personally, I didn't have any issues with this in terms of autofocus. Unfortunately, there is some focus breathing on this lens, and you cannot use focus breathing compensation on your Sony camera because that only works with native Sony lenses. So unfortunately, there is a bit of that, so something to consider if that's important to you. Chromatic aberration was overall very well controlled in my opinion, and that was for both longitudinal and lateral chromatic aberration. There was some lateral chromatic aberration at f1.4, but nothing too crazy, and overall very well controlled for that. Bokeh overall was quite pleasant and quite creamy. It looked quite beautiful all the way open at f1.4. There was no onion bokeh at all, but in some situations, the brightest specular highlights did see a little bit of outlining. And also as you go a little bit further from the center, some of those bokeh balls become a little bit oval shaped as well. But overall, I really like the bokeh. Super nice, super smooth. There's a little bit of vignetting and pincushion distortion, but nothing that you cannot fix in post. But overall, not extreme and not weird looking at all. This is what the flares look like. Overall, this lens controls flares quite well. Sometimes there is a little bit of ghosting, but overall I found that it was well controlled. Overall, I think this is a very solid lens from Kase, and especially considering that this is their first ever lens, they did a really good job with this. In fact, they did such a good job that with their first lens, they can directly compete with the Viltrox 85mm f1.4 and the Zero Aurora 85mm f1.4. And that is no easy feat. It is very sharp overall and it has great optics. It is built very well, and the magnetic filter, it's a nice thing to have, and I just hope that future lenses also include that in their filter threads in the future. And the second function button, the extra use case you can get with that, is another pretty neat thing to have. So overall, I think this is a very solid 85mm f1.4 if you're in the market for a third-party lens. That's it for this video. If you're still watching, here are a couple of videos you could watch next, and I'll see you there.